Welcome, my name is Mark Bagley, and in this video I'm going to walk you through some of the major items that you should consider when looking at investing into a direct-to-garment or DTG printer. Your goal is very simple. You want to find the best DTG printer for your company. Your company is unique. It's not the same as everybody else. So you're going to look at different characteristics internally inside your company and match them up with the different DTG printers in order to find out which one's the best for your company. Some of the things that we're going to look at are going to be the quality of the prints. If you do nothing but a lot of pure photographs, you're going to look at a printer that has a higher DPI or resolution. If most of your artwork is just vector objects or clip art, then you could look at a different printer, depending on some of the other characteristics. We'll also want to look at the hand of the print. The hand of the print is the touch or the feel of the ink that's on the shirt once it's been cured. Different viscosity of inks will apply a different amount of fluid in order to block out the garments on dark garments. So the color of the garment needs to be blocked out with a white pigment. It can apply certain amounts of ink in order to do so. That'll build up the hand on the shirt. We're also going to talk some of the factors about how easy it is to use these printers. Different printers require you to do different things, and you want to match up the level of maintenance and everything else that we're going to do with these printers and how easy or how difficult it is to print a file with the people that are actually going to be running the printer. We'll also talk about the different maintenances that are required, your overall space needed, and then what type of production level do you need. Some people are going to require the ability to print 100 shirts a day. Other people might only need 25 or 30 shirts a day. So these are the internal things that we're going to look at and try to match up with your company. There's 6 questions that you're going to need to ask yourself before you ever begin going through the process of trying to determine which DTG printer to purchase. The first question is going to be, what size of the graphics do my customers need and possibly want now and in the near future? Size of the graphics is going to be more related to how big of a printer or print area we're going to need. We're going to talk about how much space you have. And that space could be more than just the DTG printer itself, because there's other applications that we got to do, especially when it comes to printing white ink, that require us to have additional space. You're also going to need to determine who's actually going to run this DTG printer. Direct-to-garment printing has definitely simplified the process of printing onto t-shirts compared to screen printing, but there's still a learning curve there. You're still going to need to know certain things, and actually we went more from an art standpoint to now more of a technician standpoint with DTG printing. So you're really going to want to pay attention to who's actually going to operate these DTG printers. If it's going to be somebody that's pretty handy, maybe go mechanically, that's completely different than in a retail store where the individual might not have those mechanical background. You're also obviously going to look at what your budget and your production needs are. You got to find a printer that's going to match both of those. Otherwise, you might not ever make your return on investment back. You also want to look at how much your customer is really willing to pay for a DTG printed shirt. It's definitely more expensive if you're looking at the cost per a print of a shirt on direct-to-garment printing than it is on screen printing, depending on the quantities that we're talking about. DTG printing is really designed for short, medium-sized runs. Screen printing is really designed for the long runs. So you got to figure out, is the individual that's paying me, for a screen printed shirt on a large quantity going to be willing to pay more per a shirt on a smaller short run quantity? And the final thing when we look at DTG printers is, what level of training or technical support are you going to require? And that's really going to come down and be requiring from either the manufacturer or the distributor of the printer itself. So let's start off with the size of the graphics. One of the reasons why I talk to people, and first off with the size of the graphics, is there's really a big gap in the market between two size printers. There are a lot of printers that print at about that 12.5-inch wide mark itself. And then there's the next set of printers print more at that 16-inch or maybe even more mark. So it really depends if you're looking for certain types of artwork or graphics on shirts. If you're looking for that big all over front print, you're not going to get that with a 12.5-inch wide printer. You kind of want to look at more of a larger printer. So that alone can help delineate which printers we're going to look for. I will tell you, if you walk around into the different malls or the places that sell t-shirts and you pull out a retractable ruler, you're going to find out that the majority of the artwork that's been printed on shirts, whether screen printed, direct to garment printed, even if it's a type of transfer, is still going to be in that 12 by 12 or less range. So there's not a lot of big markets out there that require big prints. I live in Orlando, Florida. The South's really big in NASCAR. A lot of the NASCAR shirts actually have really big prints. So there are select markets out there that do require bigger prints. And if that's one of your markets, then you need to obviously look at a bigger printer. The other thing to keep in mind is you can have a printer that prints a huge space, some of them up to 44 inches. But you also have to have a way to cure the shirt. So having the world's largest printer doesn't really do you much good if you don't have the actual curing technique. And with direct-to-garment printing, you want to make sure you pay close attention to the ink that's being used, because that ink needs to be cured specific ways. Some of the ink requires you to use a heat press to cure it that actually applies pressure to the layers of ink to evacuate the moisture or the water-based carrier in it. Other inks can require you to run them through a textile dryer, which takes up more space, requires different electrical outputs, but that's based on the higher viscosity inks. Some of the inks will allow you to do either or. So just pay a close attention to the size of the artwork, and remember that that's also going to play a role in to how big of a curing device, which also can take up space. The other thing I'll tell you, a lot of people talk about wanting to do large prints, especially large prints on dark garments. It's important to understand the larger the graphic, the higher you're going to have to charge your customer, because the ink price you're going to use and the time that goes into printing that, which is actually not just somebody standing over it, but it's actually their labor cost, time, is going to increase as well. So the larger dark garment prints are exponentially going to grow the price of that MSRP in order for you to make your money back. The space of the DTG printing is what we'll talk about next. When we talk about this area and how much space you're going to need, don't just look at the size of the printer. Some printers are pretty small and compact. Other ones are a little bit larger. They might have a loading unloading place that you're going to need to look for as well in order to put stuff on, because they might not be conducive to loading the shirt directly on the printer. It might be easier to load somewhere else. You're also going to need a place to put your computer. If you're using some type of curing device, whether it be a heat press that can be directly next to the printer, or if you're using a textile conveyor dryer, how long of a dryer does that need to be? When we talk about how long, you've got an intake and an outtake on the dryer, but we're really talking about the actual chamber size, and how slow or fast the actual shirt goes through is based on the size of the chamber. Another area that I think a lot of people don't go into, and I purposely left off in this graphic, is the pre-treating area. How much of a space does it require? If you're going to manually pre-treat a shirt using some type of high volume, low pressure sprayer, or with the spray bottle itself, you're going to want to do that in a different area other than your print room. The overspray of the pre-treat and everything else gets really sticky, and you don't want to get that into your DTG printer, the extra mist and everything else. You could do it next to a DTG printer if you were using an automatic pre-treater that basically contains most of that overspray. But a lot of people don't have the additional money for an automatic pre-treater, so they're actually looking at a different room. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about who's actually going to run the printer. when you go to trade shows or you go look at demos for open houses and stuff, it looks really easy how these people are doing the process of direct-to-garment printing. But there's also a lot of other things that get involved to this, and these people have taken their time to learn the printers, develop the skills required to do so. So when we talk about the entire process of DTG, we're talking about actually running the equipment, maintaining, which means performing the maintenance, whether it be a daily, monthly type maintenance itself, and then also troubleshooting when something happens to the printer. Because obviously if the printer's down, you're not making any money, somebody's got to get that printer back up. Whether it's yourself as the owner, or if it's an operator, and what that operator's skills are. So you really need to pay close attention to who's really going to operate this and what type of skills when it comes to printing, doing the required maintenance, troubleshooting, and potentially removing and replacing parts on the actual DTG printer. Budget and production needs is just something everybody has to think about. You got to know how much money you're willing to spend, and it doesn't just mean on the printer itself. The printers are one thing. Look at the other things such as the curing devices, the pre-treatment method, whether it includes a high volume, low pressure sprayer, or if you're going to buy a automatic pre-treater. Other things as well will add up, such as your ink or your consumables if they're not provided in a starter kit, but also shirts. You need to plan on going into it. I always tell people somewhere around 48 shirts, plan on that being your testing period, especially if you're printing dark garment shirts. You've got to learn the whole pre-treatment or application process. You've got to learn the curing process and figure out really what works best for the equipment that you have in your shop. You've got to kind of know what your budget's going to be and how much of a production you can really do in order to calculate your ROI or your return on investment. The one thing I will tell everybody that's considering a DTG printer is really look at what the real in-shop production numbers are. A lot of manufacturers, sales reps of DTG printers will tell you, if you watch this design on the actual printer, we're going to tape how long it takes to print from once the print head starts moving. They don't take into account the actual time it takes to pre-treat, to load the garment onto a curing device to cure the pre-treatment or whatever methods they use for that. Then they take it over to the printer, put it on, load it onto the printer, depending on whether they're using a hoop ring, a tuck platen, or any other type of method, and then send the artwork from the computer to the actual printer, allow it to be downloaded before they hit that print button. And then you have the time after to pull it off and to go and cure the actual garment. And some of these things you can do while the actual printer is printing another thing. But these are all what we refer to as real in-shop production numbers. So you've got to be able to figure out what that is. The best way truly to do this, in my opinion, is to contact other DTG users using the same exact equipment and ask them for what their real production numbers are, and ask for the same size designs that you think that you're going to do on the earlier question for your customers, what size design they need. Because if it's just a left chest, obviously the production number is going to be much higher. When you're looking at forecasting, look at forecasting on your production requirements in 3, 6, 12, and 24 months. You got to expect that you have a direct-to-garment printer, and at a bare minimum it's a 24-month investment unless you have great sales and are able to make the money back. But most DTG users will look at it 24 months out. Depending on the equipment you're getting, could be much longer if it's more of a higher production volume related equipment itself, because some of these DTG printers will easily go into the several $100,000. The selling price of DTG shirts, when you walk the trade show floors and the distributors or sales reps talk to you, they probably typically will tell you, well, you can sell shirts for up to X amount of dollars. And that's what a lot of our customers are getting, or something similar to that. But the truth of the matter is, the cost that a customer is willing to pay varies greatly from California to the Midwest to the East Coast. I was recently in California, and had talked with an actual DTG user that gets upwards of $45 a print for a shirt. That $45 mark is not something that my other clients in the Midwest are able to come anywhere near close to. So a lot of it depends on what your customers are willing to pay, and the difference is with light and dark garments. So you really need to kind of test some people off and say, look, I know we've done screen printing and we've done it for 100 plus shirts, but would you be willing to only order 12 shirts at a time instead of 100? And if you were, how much would you pay for just ordering 12 shirts at a specific cost? And the next thing you need to look at is the difference between a light and a dark shirt. Because again, when you go and you print on dark garments, you have to apply the whiting. The amount of labor expense and ink expense exponentially increases. So you need to know kind of how much they're willing to pay in order to go back and calculate your ROI based on your investment. Understanding, I don't know any other way to explain this other than saying the cost to print a dark shirt is just substantially higher than a light garment. And the most of that expense is actually going to be your labor expense. You're going to have a increase in the ink, obviously, because depending on what type of ink you're using, you can run upwards of 8 to 10 times the amount of white ink as CMYK ink. But the real big factor and increased factor is actually going to be your labor expense. Technical training and support. This is one of the big areas that I push with people because there's absolutely a learning curve when it comes to printing white ink and maintaining the white ink printer. If all you're doing is printing CMYK, whether it be in a printer that's only designed for 4 channels CMYK, or if you're printing with a printer that's set up in a dual CMYK process, it is a much easier process because typically you won't have to do the pre-treatment process unless you're printing onto a polyester, synthetic, or blend type garment. And even doing so, that uses a completely different type of pre-treatment and curing process. But when you get into printing white ink, there's a certain time frame that you need to set aside when you first get this printer and learning how to do this. I strongly encourage you to either take advantage of training that's done in a manufacturer or distributor sales rep's office. If best case scenario, if it's offered, get the training done in your facility on your equipment. So that way you know everything's set up and you can help determine what are the best settings for your equipment based on the amount of pre-treatment you're putting down using your heat press or your dryer, so you can dial in everything on your specific equipment. The other thing I'd really stress is at some point down the road you're gonna need technical support or somebody there to answer questions, and it's how can you communicate those questions with them and even get parts from them in the future, because there are parts on a DTG printer that are consumable which will require you to replace them. So how do you communicate with them? Is it over the phone? Is there somebody local that can take care of you? Is there any videos or training or any information online that can help you go through the process of troubleshooting your printer or learning the process of pre-treatment? And a lot of people really focus on themselves and them getting the printer. You also need to focus on the training portion if you hire somebody new, because you might know how to do it, but you might not be somebody that's very good at teaching other people how to do it. So having the ability to have future employees come around and be trained on the process itself by the actual manufacturer, distributor, or salesperson could be a beneficial thing, depending on, again, yourself, your company, and all your other needs. To wrap up this video, the one thing that I can't stress enough to is do your research. This is a large investment, so take your time. Don't feel like you need to be rushed or hurried, especially at a trade show because of a trade show special. Take your time. Don't listen to just sales reps. Go out and contact or talk to actual users. Understand every step in the entire process. That means including how to operate, start up the printer, how to shut down the printer at the end of the day, any daily, monthly maintenance, the entire pre-treatment process, everything to do with the curing, and go through and understand how to perform your own wash test. When you talk to the different manufacturers, distributors, get sample prints, but get sample prints done on your artwork so that way you can show your customers, and get them done on shirts that your customers typically order. You're going to find out that printing on different shirts can give you different results. And if your customer's tied to a specific brand of shirts or a made in the USA type shirt, it's important that you get that artwork printed on that. When you go through and start to finalize your contract or anything else, get everything in writing. Everything from the warranty, the type of technical support, and everything else there. Once you get narrowed down what type of printers you're going to look at, I have posted up on garmenttools.com a DTG printer fact finder sheet. I'll also create another video. This video and sheet will help you narrow down what your final decision is based on specific characteristics. Everything in that sheet or chart is specifically just on facts. Has nothing to do with my personal opinion on what printers I think are best and everything else. It's facts that will help relate back to the 6 questions in this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and best with your research. Thanks.